Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call for the committee?
The following councilors have logged in and are present at this meeting: President Kuchmarek, Councilor Boschman, Councilor Kuchar, Councilor DiNatale, Councilor Green, Councilor Schultz, Councilor Squalia, Councilor Van Hazinga, Councilor Walsh, and Councilor Zarella.
Right, thank you everyone for joining us. Mute everyone here for one moment. All right, so we have the agenda will consist of the following this evening. We have items 147 and 148, 147 ordered that pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 32, the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the July 2020 continuing appropriation budget totaling $26,674,337 as follows: General Fund, $20,701,869,000. Water Enterprise Fund, $2,306,235. Wastewater Enterprise Fund, $3,561,121. Airport Fund, $105,112. And we also have 14820 ordered that the City of Fitchburg hereby approve the expenditure of funds from the following revolving fund authorized by the city ordinance up to an amount available in the fund or $100,000 except public health sustainability, which shall have a limit of $700,000 for FY 2021, whichever is less is outlined in the enclosed order. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Councilor Zarella, who I believe has a motion pertaining to suspension of the rules. Councilor Zarella, the floor is yours.
Motion to suspend the rules as pertaining to any and all rules of this council that or of our parliamentary authority which conflict with either the principle of our mobile format or with the guidance of the state regarding remote participation during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Second.
I have a motion and seconds. This will be done by roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Councilor Kuchar?
Yes.
Councilor DiNatale?
Yes.
Councilor Fleming?
I missed the whole thing.
Suspension of the rules. This is suspension of the rules just for remote participation.
Oh, yes.
Councilor Green?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Councilor Squalia?
Yay.
Councilor Van Hazinga?
Yes.
Councilor Walsh?
Yes.
Councilor Zarella?
Yes.
President Kuchmarek?
Yes.
Councilor Boschman?
A.
That is unanimous.
Motion carries. So next, we had a public forum which was advertised until noon today. No one signed up for public comment. So at this point, what I will do is I'm going to simply turn this over to Mayor DiNatale and his finance team to speak to the continuing appropriation that is before us. I'm going to unmute Mayor DiNatale. One moment here. Excellent. And we're going to unmute AJ Turigny as well. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
All right.
Good evening.
I will turn the floor over to you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We all set?
All set whenever you are.
The budget process for FY 2021 started in normal fashion. Assisting me were other members of the finance team, Chief of Staff AJ Turigny, City Auditor Calvin Brooks, and City Treasurer Ann Cervantes. In early January, we solicited budget requests from the various departments, and by early February had a first draft. We then cycled through several drafts, making changes to the spending requests and to revenue assumptions. We were in the final stages of reaching a balanced budget when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Since the end of March, we have been in a holding pattern, waiting for the state to indicate what adjustments they will be making to local aid payments. My weekly COVID-19 update of May 15th, I announced that I would not be presenting an annual budget by the usual deadline to the council. I also stated that we were waiting for guidance from the state about what local aid is projected to be and about extending deadlines for the submission of the annual budget. We continue to wait for the state to tell us what our local aid is going to be. You may have read in today's paper that the state announced that it will be level funding local aid for the months of July and August. This level funding is being done to assist communities with their cash flow. The state has given us no indication of what local aid for the year is going to be. Without that knowledge, we are not able to project what changes will have to be made in the FY21 budget. Will there be a reduction in local aid? Will that reduction be a few $100,000 or millions? How much of a local aid reduction can the city absorb without impacting city services? Is any reduction in local aid likely to be permanent? Until we know the extent of the reduction, if in fact there is a reduction, any discussion about the changes to the annual budget is conjecture and would not serve to be productive. So we wait. We wait for the state to advise on local aid. We wait for the federal government to allow states greater latitude in using federal emergency assistance. The state has issued guidelines for extending the budget process and putting in place temporary spending plans. Tonight, I am presenting a spending plan for the month of July, to be followed by spending plans for August and September. The city ought to explain the guidelines and what it is being presented. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Council President, if you could make Auditor Brooks and City Treasurer Ann Cervantes available.
Yeah, I'm on. Okay.
Mayor, turn your speaker down.
I just did.
Okay.
Good evening. Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 32, lays out the requirements and process for creating the city budget. It established the three spending categories of personal services, expenses, and capital expenses. It requires the mayor to submit a budget within 170 days after the annual organization of city government and gives city council 45 days to approve, reduce, or reject the mayor's budget. It also allows for a continuing appropriation budget on a month-to-month basis, not to exceed 3 months, when an annual budget cannot be approved due to circumstances beyond the city's control. This pandemic and its resulting disruptions certainly qualify as circumstances beyond the city's control. The item before you tonight is a continuing appropriation budget for the month of July 2020. While it is called a budget, it really is more of a spending plan, since it lists only spending amounts and no revenue sources. Its purpose is to keep city government functioning until an annual budget can be approved. If you turn to the spreadsheet, you'll see that the first column is labeled Account Description and shows the basic breakdown of the city's budget by department and generally by the three categories listed in Chapter 44, Section 32. That is personal services, ordinary expenses, and capital expenses. While the annual budget shows more line item detail, the actual vote by City Council is understood to be approval for the total in each category and not the amounts in each line. If City Council approval were for each individual line, then a vote would be required to move money between any lines. And I think City Council has better things to do than to have to act on a $500 transfer from library heating oil to library electricity. The next two columns on the spreadsheet are for reference only. The column titled FY 2020 Revised Budget is the current year budget, including both the original appropriation and any subsequent appropriation from available funds or transfers from within. The column labeled 1/12 is simply the FY 2020 revised budget divided by 12. It is included for comparison purposes only. The next three columns are the continuing appropriation budget numbers for July, August, and September. Tonight, City Council is voting on the July budget, so that column is boxed. When the August continuing appropriation budget is presented next month, then the August column will be boxed. All 3 months have been presented together for better comparison, and in the hope that a thorough discussion of all 3 months tonight will alleviate the need for a meeting like this during the next 2 months. It is our expectation that the same spreadsheet with the box moved to either August or September will be presented with each order. There is a variation month to month in many of the lines, and an explanation for most can be found in the right-hand column. This budget is not a 1/12 budget. It recognizes that certain annual payments are due at certain times, and some activities do not occur equally across all 12 months. For example, election and registration activities are much higher in September because of the primary election scheduled for September 1st. Likewise, recreation activities drop off in September when the children go back to school. Some lines do show an increase for fiscal year 2020 because the known cost has increased. For example, the pension assessment is paid in full in July and has a scheduled increase per the funding schedule. Likewise, labor contract changes in wage rates and step increases have also been factored into these figures. We will gladly answer any questions you may have, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Questions or comments from council? Councilor Boschman, the floor is yours first.
Calvin Brooke and I, we talked earlier this week. I just want to make one thing clear, that I'll probably accept this temporary budget for July, August, and September. But there are cuts that I want to be making and the whole when the original budget comes out. But I do have one question. Miscellaneous, Johnny Appleseed. Now this says here we're going to pay them in July. Now, I told Mr. Brooks, Mr. Calvin Brooks, that I wouldn't make any recommendation to cut until the regular budget. But if we're going to make a payment in July of $50,000, I can't see that. Are we going to make a payment in $50,000 in July for Johnny Appleseed?
Yes, we are.
If I may answer, the intention would be yes to make that $50,000 payment. That, as I understand it, is for the Johnny Appleseed Visitor Center, and it's a payment that has been made for several of the last years.
Chamber of Commerce.
But my question to you is that's from the hotel tax, right? And my understanding on the hotel tax, that Great Loaf went way down because of the virus. So how can we give something that we're not going to get in return like we did in the previous years? Should it be less, Mr. Chair?
Councilor, that's a fair question, and I'll defer to the city's finance team to respond to that particular item.
Yeah.
Mayor, could you field Councilor Boschman's question about providing the entire year?
This is the Chamber of Commerce allotment that we we provide to market the city and market the region. Been doing this for several years. All right. And it's really not that significant amount of money, but I think the return certainly warrants the expenditure.
Mr. Chair, I can understand what the mayor's saying, but we had a big return when we were advertising, and the return ain't going to be there this year. There's going to be a significant amount of cuts that we're going to receive less, a lot less than anticipated. So how can you justify giving $50,000 when we don't know what the cherry sheet's going to be, and it may even affect our employment here in Pittsburgh? I
understand what you're asking, Counselor. What?
I think $50,000 is a lot of money to be given.
Yeah, and that's right. And we get a return. This is no time to be leaving the chamber in a lurch. All right. This is a time for us to join together. That's what we're doing. We're funding that $50,000 because we believe there's a return on it. Now, if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. But that's my answer.
Well, I guess, Mayor, my answer is I want to make a cut.
Okay.
So,
Counselor, do you have any further questions?
no, that would be it.
Next, we have Counselor Van Hazinga. Counselor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as Mr. Brooks mentioned, there is some seasonality with our expenses, and the July expenses, the appropriations that we're looking at are about double the 1/12 if we just took last year's budget and divided it. I am reassured that the state's getting level funding state aid for the next few months. I was just wondering, are we in a position to adequately fund the July appropriation, seeing how it's a much higher than the total budget divided by 12? How does that work with our cash on hand?
Counselor, I'm going to defer to Auditor Brooks. Auditor, if you're prepared to answer that question. One moment, counselors. Auditor Brooks, I'm trying to unmute you here. I don't know if you can unmute on your ends.
Can you hear me?
You're not on mute. I'm going to let the city treasurer answer that, please.
I apologize, Ms. Cervantes. We'll unmute you here. All right, now we can hear you. And unfortunately, I can't hear you. Counselors, can you hear Ann as well? Okay.
Now I'm on.
All right, wonderful.
Sorry. Yes, the city does have adequate cash flow to pay all the bills in July.
Counselor Van Hazinga, the floor is still yours. Feel free to ask.
So nobody knows how long the state budgeting process is going to drag out. Is there a point where this will start to be a problem, or can we continue to move forward just going month to month with the state aid level at last year's level?
If I may answer, I think the state is going to have to do something by the end of the summer, because they can't go more than a couple of months without there being a budget in place. I know Mass General Law 4432 allows cities to have 3 months of this continuing appropriation, and then there's no more legal authority to do anything. Tax bills go out in November, so we have to make sure that we pass the budget so we can set the tax rate and do all of that. I expect the state's going to have to do something before we get to too far into the summer.
Okay.
And just one other thing, you are correct that the July total of 20 million is about double the 1/12. 13 million of that is with the pension assessment, which is a one-time payment in July for the year.
I guess my last question, it concerns the local tax receipts for the spring. Have they been significantly affected by the COVID pandemic and the business shutdown, or are we still on close to the expected track?
Yes, we have had some impact on the local tax receipts. We are somewhat behind where we would be at this point last year. We extended the due date on the fourth quarter bills and interest until June 29th. So there are people, I'm sure, waiting until the end of this month before they pay. And we have not been unable to send out demands yet. Those will go out in July, and I will collect some more in July when we're able to send out the demands.
Okay, thank you.
I understand Councilor Boschman's earlier concern about the Johnny Appleseed Visitor Center, but I do agree with the mayor here of now is the time where we double down on our supports with tourism and trying to bolster commerce throughout North Central Massachusetts. We know our small businesses and businesses at every size, they're struggling. They're barely getting by for many of them, and many of our industries and businesses rely on customer bases that come from beyond just Fitchburg in North Central Massachusetts. So I agree that we need to do everything within our power to ensure that the economy stays on track and that we do everything we can to support business of every kind in our city. We're in this situation and we're talking about being able to fund for the next few months because of tax situations. And this is one area that we get to have a direct impact on our local economy. So for that reason, I'm in support of continuing our support and our appropriation of the Johnny Appleseed Visitor Center and promotion of tourism of Fitchburg Industries. Next, we have Councilor Squalia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Auditor Brooks, you noted how our continuing appropriations budget is a spending plan, but not a revenue plan. How has this budget taken into account the likely decrease in local revenue and potentially local aid?
Presents itself. Yeah, I think we're at this point looking at at different scenarios in terms of what could or couldn't happen, getting ourselves ready for different eventualities. This spending plan doesn't have any new spending in it. It's basically just continuing as we have. The mayor did initiate a spending freeze, I guess about a month ago, to where we're monitoring more carefully what we're spending money on. We've also talked about a hiring freeze where we're just being more careful about filling positions at this point in time until we have a better idea of what the state is going to do. Beyond that, as I said earlier, it's hard to know because we have really no idea what the state's going to do for cuts, whether it's going to be, or reductions, whether it's going to be something that we can just absorb, or whether it's something we're going to have to make some really hard decisions on.
Because this year, it's in this FY21 budget that we were talking about reducing our amount of free cash, right? As we were discussing last year. So are we planning on kind of trying to cut back on the spending and hoping that free cash kind of grows from there, or we're not really adjusting the budget too much yet?
I would say we're not really adjusting the budget that much right now on the spending plan. I think once we know what our revenue figures are, then we have a better handle on what changes we have to make within the budget, what we can afford to do and what we can't afford to do.
Thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Schultz. I'll mute you here. Councilor Schultz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President.
Kuchmarek. I just wanted to say that I'm in support of you and the mayor as far as the visitor center go, that now's not the time during a pandemic to hurt our local businesses, and they need all the help they can get. And I agree with both of you on that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Zarilla. The floor is yours.
Yes, I'd just like to also chime in on that same subject, that it may very well be true that we'll see less of a return on our investment this year than we have in prior years, because the entire economy is depressed right now for obvious reasons. But that's all the more reason that every dollar we can bring into the city for our businesses is going to be essential. Small businesses don't have a lot of padding on the bottom line like large corporations do. Small businesses in Fitchburg that have been forced to shut down for months now and are only starting to reopen under heavy restrictions are very, very likely skating on the line of commercial viability right now. They're holding on for dear life and hoping that we open up fast enough that they'll survive. And I'm not saying that in favor or against any particular reopening plan. My point is just that they're in pretty dire straits. So anything we can do to ensure that they get as large a share of this difficult economy as possible, we should do that, because it may not pay us back this year, but it'll pay us back in the future when we don't have as many failed businesses as we could otherwise if we fail to support them.
Thank you, Councilor. Next, we have Councilor Di Natale. The floor is yours.
My question is for Mr. Brooks or the finance team. I have a concern about what some of my colleagues may do down the road when we get a plan from the state. And what I'm going with this is we're treading water right now. We're entering in a territory we can't see in front of us. So we're playing it safe where we can. My concern is the city is setting itself up, and it's not the city's fault. You can't avoid this. But what I'm concerned about is when we do get a plan from the state and we get a handle on our revenue streams and forecasts, I hope my colleagues will not take that opportunity at that time to say, well, we shouldn't have spent the money we're talking about tonight. Because right now we're going to approve potentially 3 months worth of spending without any understanding right now of exactly what our inflow is going to be. So when you folks figure that out in September or hopefully earlier, my concern is once you learn what the state's going to give us and all the other receipts we're going to get, clearly there are going to be adjustments in Q2, 3, and 4 because of what we've incurred already in Q1. You know what I'm trying to say here, finance team, is when you get that plan, there are going to be adjustments made for the last 9 months or 7 months or 8 months. I hope the council doesn't take the opportunity at that time to go, well, see, we shouldn't have spent this 26 million because now we got to reduce spending for the rest of the year. And I'm trying to let the public know and just get it out there now that we can't avoid doing this. We don't have any idea what's going to take place. There are expenses that are to be paid now, and there are expenses that we're level funding. So I certainly won't do this. I hope none of the rest of us will, in criticizing the finance team for the 3 months of spending we're going to approve tonight potentially because of things they didn't know tonight that they're going to know 3 months from now. So to the auditor or the treasurer or the mayor, is it fair to say that any adjustments we're going to have to make is going to come when we actually get a handle on what our revenues are going to be, good or bad?
Yes, sir.
Counselor, I think you're correct. This is really just treading water. the spending plan. And I think once we know what the state's going to do, we can make our determination. What's unfortunate, as you suggest, is that we're going to be making an annual adjustment, but only spreading it over 9 months because we will have already been 3 months into the year. There's no way around it. The only way
Exactly. Yeah, that's my point in my statement. There's no way around it. I mean, if you, you know, it's a catch-22. You could reduce spending today and then find out later we didn't have to do that, and then we add it. And there are some agencies that rely on the money right now. So what I just want to make clear is there is no expectation on my part that what you're doing for the first 3 months is putting us in jeopardy. What you're doing is something you can't avoid doing. You got to pay the pension bill. In terms of the Johnny Appleseed Center, for example, I knew that was going to get talked about tonight. It's talked about every year for God only knows what reason. It's not even pennies on the dollar in the whole grand scheme of things. But I guess the argument at that time was, I guess the argument being made is, why can't that 50,000, I'm playing devil's advocate here, why can't that 50,000 be evenly distributed? Is the concern because we don't know what's going to happen after September, so we want to give them their full payment now? Or I guess that where the question was going earlier was, why are we giving them the full amount today? Why not give it to them in quarterly installments? I know the answer. I'm asking you. I mean, my concern is if we gave them in quarterly installments, then we're not committing them a full year, and they're going to be treading water themselves or seriously hurt by not having a firm commitment from us. And I don't think we should put that agency that serves to better the city in a position where they can't operate going forward over $50,000 out of $130 million. So it's not really a question. It was more of a comment. I want to thank you, gentlemen. And madam, this is my 13th budget, and I've never seen this before. This is the first time for me doing a 1/12. It's always been kind of like a threat to counselors that didn't want to pass a budget. Well, if we don't pass a budget, we're going to have to go to 1/12, and everyone kind of winces and goes, "Oh, we don't want to do that." So this is brand new territory for me, and I don't recall the last time we did this. I want to say it's been at least 20 years since we've done a 1/12, which really identifies the magnitude of what we're facing today. It's unprecedented. So I think all of the discussions about reductions in spending and utilization of free cash and whatnot, that's got to come when we get a plan from the state. But for now, it's a responsible plan going forward with the major caveat that there are going to be changes, good or bad, in the near future. But I don't want people to think that what we're doing today is going to guarantee bad decisions later. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Green. Councillor Green, if you could unmute yourself. Perfect.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to commend the efforts of the whole finance team, as well as the members here at City Hall tonight, putting this together with such unprecedented times. As a small business owner, I rely on month-to-month budgets. So I appreciate the fact that, as difficult as this is, I understand the need to do this. And I also want to commend the efforts of our department heads that I have every confidence in the world backing with a budget like this, that they are not out frivolously spending, that they're not, burning money that's left over in the account, that they are doing their due diligence and being fiscally responsible to this community and to all of our taxpayers who are going to have to share in this burden, because quite frankly, there will be property owners that will not be able to afford to pay their taxes. They will not be able to afford to send in their water bills. So we, as the taxpayers that pay those bills are going to have to absorb that probably into the second quarter of 2021. So I think we should all plan for that. I do want to say that I will always continue to be a cheerleader for the Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate the work that they do every day for this community and beyond. So I will never look to not help them in a time of need. And if it's time for our bill to come due, then it is our obligation to pay that so they can in turn do the work that we need to do, because it's not you and I out there hoofing promoting Fitchburg like the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, we do in our own way, but they do it at such a greater level than you or I independently can do. So I want to acknowledge all the hard work, especially during this unprecedented times that everybody is doing. Thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Walsh. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to commend the finance team for putting together this budget. I think that it's one of those things where you're kind of, and not that you're doing it blindly, but it's almost like you're doing this without knowing all of the facts. And I think the fact that you've put all this together, and I know you spent a lot of time looking at possibilities and circumstances that may or may not happen in the future. I think the fact that you've put this all together, I think it was extraordinary work on your part, and I thank you for that.
Speaking for the second time, we have Councilor Zarella. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I see, however, that Councilor Di Natale has a brief question for the auditor, so I will yield for that question.
Councilor Di Natale, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor Zarella. Mr. Auditor, as July progresses and towards the end of July, when we start getting a feel for what our receipts are, is there any strategy going forward for the next 3 months that says, okay, as July closes, do we have to re-look at August and September and make adjustments? And as August closes, do we make adjustments to September? Or is this going to be the spend plan, irrespective of any information we obtain from the state and or any tax receipts we collect in those months? So is this hard and fast for the 3 months, or are you going to be analyzing as intake inflows coming these numbers and adjusting accordingly? Which I think require us to vote on it, obviously, but yeah.
I think what we're going to end up doing is using these numbers for 3 months. I don't anticipate a lot of change in those numbers because they're based on historical trends. What may change things in terms of our actual spending would be what the state does. If the state really makes a dramatic millions of dollars in cuts in local aid, then we will be forced to have to start doing things ahead of an annual budget in order to get our fiscal house in order. But we don't know that's going to happen. A lot of communities are trying to have passed budgets where they've just assumed a level funding. There are different ways to do it. In this case, I think we're trying to be conservative in the sense of saying, okay, we're just going to continue spending in our normal fashion for a couple of months until we get a firm idea as to what the state's going to do. From a cash flow perspective, I think the city has, and the treasurer could attest to it more, but I think we're in a cash position where we can afford to pay our bills over the next few months without too much of a problem. It's going to catch up to us further down as the state makes their decisions.
Yeah, and she testified to that effect. And when I said earlier about going in blind, what I meant was blind on the revenue, not blind on the spending. Your spending methodologies and what you arrived at make perfect sense. And it is a conservative approach. I know there are other communities surrounding us and in the Commonwealth that are adopting a full year budget now, whether it's level funding or there's cuts, but they're just doing the full 12 months. And the reason why I don't like doing that is because it kind of gets people complacent, especially municipal employees, to say, we're safe for the full year. To me, it gives people a false sense of security, and it puts the cart before the horse. This way, we're taking it slowly quarter by quarter. So I think it does a service to our employees and our residents and taxpayers to say, we're not saying that the full year is going to be what it was previously. So we're taking it slow right now. And when more information comes, we adjust accordingly instead of just passing a budget for the full year and then shocking everybody in midstream that we got to make drastic reductions or changes, if you will. So I don't agree with that methodology. I definitely agree with this one. So thank you, and I'm all set.
Next, we have Councilor Boishman speaking. I apologize. Returning back to Councilor Zarella. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to, first, I agree with Councilor Di Natale with respect to the fact that the finance team is doing the best they can with what they have, and it would be very unreasonable to look back in a few months with 2020 hindsight and say, they should have done this, they should have done that. No one knows any better than what they're projecting right now. And it would be irresponsible of any of us to pretend in hindsight that we did. That being said, I just wanted to double check my understanding of what we're voting on tonight. We are only voting on 1 month's plan at the moment, not 3 months. The other 2 months are planned to be the same, but we will be voting on them separately, correct?
That's correct, Councilor. We'll be having a meeting for a formal vote each month for each of the next 3 months in advance of the next month's appropriation, if you will. We've been given the additional August and September data and figures so that we have the context of what other costs will be coming down the pike, as well as a point of comparison for this month as opposed to the following two. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor. Councilor Auditor Brooks.
Yes, you are correct, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'm all set.
Speaking for the second time, we have Councilor Boishman. The floor is yours. You just have to unmute.
Yeah. Oh. Me?
Councilor Boishman, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I just want to make it very clear. I'm not against the Chamber of Commerce. I have no problem with the Chamber of Commerce whatsoever. But I'm looking at, when I watch Channel 5 News or CNN News, and they're telling the world that the second wave is going to happen. There's going to be a second wave of this virus, and nobody knows the predictions what's going to happen. So why give money away that we probably need down the road? Yeah, $50,000, that's not a lot of money in $130 million budget. You're absolutely right. But you give $50,000 here, $50,000 there, $50,000 here, it all adds up. I agree with Councilor Di Natale said. Why don't we just give a partial? We don't know what's going to happen down the road. What's wrong with giving a partial? We're not going to get the kind of money that we did last year or the year before. We already know that. So why give it now? We're not giving the small business it. All we're doing is taking away advertisement. It's not giving small business anything. We're taking away advertisement. And if the virus picks up, people are not going to go out. And they're not going to go out to eat because they're all, like me, going to be afraid, like us all. Because we don't know what we're fighting because we can't see it. So this is why the government of Massachusetts is taking its time opening up everything to make sure. But it's going to go up. It's already going up across the country. You see it. You hear it every day. You read it in the paper. So why not be cautious about it? Really? All right, that's it. And I repeat again, at the full budget, there is going to be cuts.
Thank you, Councilor Boishman. I would just add that, the $50,000 to Johnny Appleseed as an organization is going to an organization that then allocates. They have to set their budget, they have to meet payroll, and they have to commit to a year of expenses for their fiscal year as well. If we restrict to quarterly or monthly or anything else, we're then holding them hostage to the same system that we ourselves are hostage to. So they might not be able to meet their payroll for the entire year ahead. The idea here is that we're committing to an entire year of assisting, tourism industry and promoting industry across our region, and that they have the understanding and the security to budget and prepare for an entire fiscal year. That's a luxury we wish we had, and that's where $50,000 can go a long way to assisting an organization in promoting an entire year's worth of economic development and tourism activities across our region. With that, I have a motion made by Councillor Zarella and a second made by Councillor Fleming. And at this point, we'll do this by roll call vote. Madam Clerk, I'm going to unmute everyone here. Madam Clerk, if you would conduct this by roll call vote.
I'm sorry, President Kushmarek, is that a motion to move the?
A motion to approve and a second by Councillor Fleming.
Thank you. Councillor Kucher?
Yes.
Councillor Giannittali? Councillor Giannittali? Thank you. Councillor Fleming?
Yes.
Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Schultz?
Yes.
Councillor Squalia?
Yay.
Councillor Van Hazinga?
Yes.
Councillor Walsh?
Yes.
Councillor Zarella?
Yes.
President Kushmarek?
Yes.
Councillor Boschman?
Yes, I'll be the only nay.
That is 10-1.
10-1, the motion carries. And then we have 148-20. I'd entertain a motion to approve 148-20.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve 148-20. Speaking on the motion, if we do not have any objections, we'll adopt this by unanimous consent. Seeing no objections, it is adopted. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and second to adjourn. Seeing no objections, we adjourn by
Mr. President.
consent. Mr. Mayor?
I just want to thank the council for their vote and their input. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everyone stay tuned. We'll exit this meeting. This recommendation will be sent to a special meeting of the City Council for a vote on the report out of this committee. So to the viewing public, we'll see you in 5 minutes. Councilors, please make sure you log out of this meeting and log into the separate link that you've been provided.